Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped the frost from her gloves as she stared at the massive metal cylinder buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice. After 3 months of careful excavation, her team had finally uncovered what satellite images had hinted at for years. The object was perfectly preserved, its surface gleaming with an otherworldly shimmer that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Carbon dating puts this thing at over 2,000 years old. Her assistant Marcus called out from behind a bank of monitoring equipment. But the metal alloy is something we've never seen before. It's not corroding, not aging, nothing. Elena ran her hand along the smooth surface, feeling a strange warmth emanating from within despite being buried in ice for centuries. The cylinder was enormous, nearly 30 feet long and 8 feet in diameter. Strange symbols were etched along its length, symbols that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. The discovery had happened by accident. A routine climate research expedition had detected an unusual electromagnetic signature deep beneath the Ross ice shelf. What they thought might be a meteorite turned into the most significant archaeological find in human history. The global scientific community was buzzing with theories. But Elena knew they were looking at something far beyond anything Earth had ever produced. Dr. Vasquez, you need to see this, called out Dr. James Chen, the team's xenoarchaeologist. He was crouched near what appeared to be a control panel that had been hidden beneath centuries of ice buildup. These symbols. They're not random. There's a pattern here, almost like a sequence. Elena made her way over, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air of the excavation tent. The symbols on the panel were glowing faintly, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost organic. As she watched, the pattern began to accelerate. "It's responding to our presence," she whispered, hardly believing her own words. After 2,000 years, this thing is still active. The international team that had assembled around the discovery included experts from every relevant field. Dr. Sarah Kim, a specialist in ancient languages, had been studying the symbols for weeks without making significant progress. Dr. Ahmed Hassan, a physicist, was baffled by the energy readings coming from the cylinder. And Dr. Lisa Anderson, a medical expert, was preparing for whatever they might find inside. "The internal atmosphere is perfectly stable," Dr. Anderson reported, checking her readings for the 100th time that day. Oxygen, nitrogen, even trace elements that would support human life. Whatever's in there has been preserved in perfect conditions. The decision to open the cylinder had not been made lightly. Months of international debate, ethical committees, and safety protocols had led to this moment. Elena carried the weight of responsibility for what they were about to do. The world was watching, and she knew that whatever they found inside would change everything. "All teams, prepare for breach protocol," Elena announced into her radio. Around the excavation site, dozens of specialists took their positions. Medical teams stood ready, containment units were activated, and every conceivable safety measure was in place. The opening mechanism was surprisingly simple once Dr. Kim had deciphered the symbol sequence. A series of touches in the correct order caused the cylinder to emit a low humming sound, followed by a gentle hiss as ancient seals were broken. Elena felt her heart racing as a thin line of light appeared around the cylinder's midsection. "Atmospheric readings are normal," Dr. Hassan called out. "No toxic gases, no radiation spikes. Whatever preservation system they used, it's incredibly sophisticated." As the cylinder slowly opened like a giant flower blooming, a mist escaped and dissipated in the cold Antarctic air. Elena stepped forward with her team, their breath held collectively as they peered inside the ancient vessel. What they saw defied all expectations. Inside lay a human figure, or something remarkably close to human. The being was tall, perhaps 7 feet in length, with elongated limbs and features that were familiar, yet distinctly different. Its skin had a pale, almost translucent quality, and strange markings covered its arms and face. But most remarkably, its chest was rising and falling gently. "It's alive," Dr. Anderson whispered, her medical scanner beeping rapidly. "Heart rate is slow but steady. Brain activity is minimal but present. This being has been in some form of suspended animation for 2 millennia." Elena stared in wonder at the sleeping figure. The being wore clothing made of a material that seemed to shift between solid and liquid, flowing like water but maintaining its shape. Around its neck hung a pendant that pulsed with the same rhythm as its heartbeat, emitting a soft blue light. "Look at the bone structure," Dr. Anderson continued, studying her scans. "It's human. Definitely human. But evolved. The cranial capacity is larger. The skeletal frame is adapted for different gravity conditions. This isn't just ancient. This is advanced." Dr. Chen was documenting everything with trembling hands. "The implications are staggering. This proves that humanity has been spacefaring for thousands of years. This being, this Earthborn as the texts suggest, represents a chapter of human history we never knew existed." The texts Dr. Chen referred to were fragments found within the cylinder itself, written in a script that Dr. Kim had partially translated. They spoke of travelers from Earth, of a great journey among the stars, and of a return that was both a homecoming and a warning. "The translation is incomplete," Dr. Kim explained, reviewing her notes. "But the fragments mention something about a deep sleep journey and a burden carried across the void. There's also repeated reference to something called the silence and warnings about awakening." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. "Warnings about awakening? You mean warnings about waking this being up?" The text is unclear, but yes. There are passages that suggest this individual was placed in suspended animation not just for preservation, but for containment. The symbols mention a great responsibility and a great danger. Despite the warnings in the ancient texts, the scientific implications of their discovery were too significant to ignore. The being before them represented proof of humanity's ancient spacefaring past, evidence of technologies far beyond current understanding, and possibly answers to questions about human evolution and destiny. Dr. Anderson ran more detailed medical scans, her equipment revealing layer after layer of mysteries. "The cellular structure is remarkable. There's no decay, no aging at the molecular level. Whatever process was used to preserve this being, it's maintained perfect biological function for over 2,000 years. The technology implications alone could revolutionize medicine," Dr. Hassan added, studying energy readings from the cylinder. "If we could understand how this preservation system works, we could eliminate aging, cure diseases, extend human life indefinitely." Elena made the decision that would change the course of human history. Despite the warnings in the ancient texts, despite the unknown risks, the potential benefits were too great to ignore. "Begin revival procedures, but maintain maximum containment protocols. We don't wake this being until we're absolutely certain we can handle any consequences." The revival process took 3 days of careful preparation. Dr. Anderson developed a gradual awakening protocol based on the being's unique physiology. The cylinder itself seemed to assist the process, its internal systems responding to their medical interventions with surprising cooperation. "Neural activity is increasing," Dr. Anderson reported on the 3rd day. "Brainwave patterns are becoming more complex. It's dreaming, or experiencing some form of consciousness during the awakening process." Elena watched the monitors with growing excitement and apprehension. Whatever this being had experienced during its long sleep, whatever memories and knowledge it carried, would soon be revealed. The pendant around its neck was pulsing faster now, its blue light growing brighter with each passing hour. "Cellular regeneration is accelerating," Dr. Anderson continued. "It's like the body is rebuilding itself, optimizing for consciousness. This isn't just awakening from sleep. This is resurrection." As the revival process entered its final stages, strange phenomena began occurring around the excavation site. Electronic equipment experienced minor malfunctions, the ice around the cylinder began forming unusual patterns, and several team members reported vivid dreams featuring vast starfields and distant worlds. "Something's changing, Doctor," Hassan reported, his voice tight with concern. "Energy readings from the cylinder are spiking. Whatever's happening inside, it's affecting the entire area." Elena knew they were past the point of no return. The being was awakening, whether they were ready or not. 2,000 years of sleep were coming to an end. And with that awakening would come answers to humanity's greatest questions. But as the ancient texts had warned, some knowledge came with a price. The being's eyes opened just as the Antarctic sun began to set, casting the excavation site in an eerie twilight glow. Those eyes were unmistakably human yet alien, filled with an intelligence that seemed to span millennia. As consciousness returned to the ancient traveler, Elena realized that their discovery was not just archaeological. They had awakened something that had been sleeping for reasons they didn't yet understand. The warnings in the ancient texts suddenly seemed less like superstition and more like prophecy. Whatever this being brought with it from the depths of space and time was about to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. The Earthborn sat up slowly, its movement graceful despite thousands of years of sleep. It looked around the excavation site, with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. Every person. Every piece of equipment. When its gaze finally settled on Elena, she felt as if she were being examined, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. The being opened its mouth and spoke a single word in a language that predated all known human speech. Yet somehow, Elena understood its meaning perfectly. It was a greeting, but also a warning. And perhaps most disturbingly, an apology. What they had awakened was not just an ancient human from the stars. They had awakened something that carried with it the memories and consequences of humanity's first journey to the stars. And as the being stood and stepped from its cylinder onto Antarctic soil, Elena realized that their discovery was about to become humanity's greatest challenge. The being stood 7 feet tall in the harsh Antarctic light, its pale skin seeming to absorb and reflect the aurora that danced overhead. Elena watched in fascination as it moved with fluid grace despite having been motionless for 2 millennia. Its first steps on Earth in over 2,000 years were measured and deliberate, as if it were remembering how to exist in this world. "Remarkable," Dr. Anderson whispered, monitoring the being's vital signs on her portable scanner. "Muscle tone is perfect. Reflexes are enhanced beyond normal human parameters. Whatever hibernation technology preserved it, the being is actually healthier now than when it first entered the cylinder." The being turned toward Dr. Anderson, and she gasped as those ancient eyes focused on her scanner. Without speaking, it reached out and touched the device. Immediately, the screen flooded with data that her equipment shouldn't have been capable of displaying. Complex biological readings, environmental assessments, and streams of information in languages that didn't exist on Earth. "It's interfacing with our technology," Dr. Hassan said, his voice filled with wonder and growing concern. "Not just touching it but communicating with it directly." Elena stepped forward cautiously, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. The being regarded her with an expression that seemed both ancient and infinitely sad. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that resonated through her bones, speaking words in perfect English, despite having been asleep since before the language existed. "You were not meant to find us yet," the being said, its voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The calculations showed humanity would need another 1,000 years before this discovery. Something has accelerated your technological development beyond our projections." "Who are you?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer would change everything they believed about human history. "I am Zara 73, navigator of the deep path, carrier of the burden from beyond the spiral's edge." The being's eyes grew distant, as if seeing something beyond the physical world. "I am what remains of humanity's first children among the stars, and I am the guardian of humanity's greatest mistake." Dr. Kim stepped forward, her translation notes forgotten in the face of direct communication. "The texts in your cylinder spoke of Earth travelers and warnings." "What warnings?" Zara 73 gestured toward the sky, where the aurora was growing brighter and more active than Elena had ever seen it. "We left Earth when your ancestors were building the first cities. We traveled beyond the edge of known space, seeking knowledge and new worlds. What we found..." The being paused, and Elena saw something that looked like anguish cross its ancient features. "What we found should have remained lost." The scientific team gathered closer, their instruments recording everything. Elena noticed that electronic devices near the being were operating differently, displaying information they weren't designed to process, and connecting to networks that didn't exist. In the space between galaxies, Zara 7-3 continued. We encountered structures that were not built by any intelligence we could comprehend. Vast constructs that existed in dimensions our minds could barely perceive. We thought we were explorers, but we were merely insects discovering the remains of gods. Dr. Hassan's readings were going wild, energy signatures unlike anything in terrestrial physics. The electromagnetic field around the being is creating a localized distortion. It's affecting our equipment, our communications, everything. Within those structures, Zara 7-3 said, oblivious to the growing chaos around the camp, we found technology beyond our understanding, devices that could reshape matter at the quantum level, consciousnesses that existed as pure information, and something else. Something that had been waiting in the darkness between stars for countless eons. Elena felt a chill of premonition. What was waiting? An intelligence that fed on consciousness itself, a presence that could inhabit and control any thinking mind it encountered. We tried to study it, to understand it, but understanding was exactly what it wanted. Every thought we directed toward it made it stronger. Every attempt to comprehend its nature gave it more power over us. The aurora overhead was now a brilliant curtain of light, visible even in the perpetual daylight of the Antarctic summer. But Elena realized it wasn't aurora at all. The lights were responding to the being's presence, to its memories, to the story it was telling. Half our expedition was consumed by this entity before we realized the danger. Zara 7-3 continued. Those who were taken became extensions of its will, their bodies unchanged but their minds hollowed out and replaced. We called it the silence, for it consumed all individual thought and left only its own singular consciousness behind. Dr. Anderson's scanner was displaying impossible readings. Dr. Vasquez, I'm detecting multiple neural patterns from the being. It's not just one consciousness. It's like there are dozens of minds operating in parallel. Zara 7-3 nodded gravely. The survivors of our expedition found a way to resist the silence, but at great cost. We merged our remaining consciousnesses, creating a collective mind that could withstand its influence. I am not one person, but many, carrying the memories and knowledge of all who stood against the darkness. Elena was beginning to understand the true scope of what they had awakened. You came back to Earth to warn us. We came back to Earth to prepare for the inevitable. The silence is not bound by distance or time, as we understand them. Once it becomes aware of a species, it will pursue them across any space, through any barrier. Our exploration led it to humanity's location in the universe. We could not destroy it, but we could delay its arrival. The lights in the sky were forming patterns now. Geometric shapes that seemed to extend into dimensions Elena couldn't perceive. The very air around the excavation site was growing thick with energy, and she realized they were witnessing something beyond natural phenomena. The cylinder you found was not just a preservation chamber, Zara 7-3 explained. It was a beacon, designed to activate when humanity reached sufficient technological development to defend itself against what is coming. Your discovery of our resting place was not accident, but design. Dr. Chen was frantically documenting everything, but his equipment was malfunctioning, displaying symbols and patterns that hurt to look at directly. The electromagnetic disturbance is spreading. Our satellite communications are down, and the interference is reaching research stations across Antarctica. Elena realized that the activation of the beacon was already having global effects. What exactly is this beacon signaling? Elena realized that it is announcing to the silence that humanity has reached technological maturity. But more importantly, it is activating defense systems that we established across your solar system during our long journey home. Ancient devices hidden within asteroids, buried beneath planetary surfaces, waiting for this moment. The implications were staggering. Elena's mind reeled as she considered that humanity's solar system had been prepared as a battleground for a war that began before recorded history. Defense systems? What kind of defense systems? Quantum disruptors that can fracture the silence's consciousness. Reality stabilizers that prevent it from manipulating the fundamental forces of physics. And consciousness shields that can protect human minds from infiltration. But these systems require living operators. Minds that have been prepared and trained for the task ahead. Dr. Hassan looked up from his readings, his face pale. The energy disturbance is accelerating. Whatever's happening here, it's spreading across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Radio telescopes around the world are detecting our signal. Elena understood with growing dread. The signal isn't just activating your defense systems, it's also telling the silence where we are. Zara 73 nodded solemnly. The beacon serves both purposes. We could not hide humanity forever. But we could ensure that when the silence found you, you would be ready to fight. The question is whether 2,000 years was enough time to prepare adequate defenses. Around the excavation site, the environment itself was beginning to change. The ice was melting in perfect geometric patterns, revealing structures that had been hidden beneath the surface. Elena realized that the entire area had been prepared as some kind of staging ground for the conflict to come. These structures, Dr. Chen said, pointing to the emerging buildings, they're made of the same material as the cylinder. How extensive is this installation? The Antarctic facility extends for hundreds of kilometers beneath the ice. It contains manufacturing capabilities for the weapons and defenses you will need, training centers where human consciousness can be prepared for mental combat, and archives containing all the knowledge we gathered about the silence during our long war. Dr. Anderson was studying her readings with growing alarm. Dr. Vasquez, I'm detecting massive changes in global electromagnetic patterns. This isn't just affecting Antarctica anymore. The disturbance is planetary. Elena looked at the ancient being with a mixture of awe and terror. How long do we have before this silence arrives? Time moves differently for the silence than for physical beings. It exists partially outside normal space-time, using quantum entanglement to project its consciousness across vast distances. Based on the beacon's activation, I estimate you have perhaps 6 months before the first probes of its consciousness reach your solar system. The full weight of responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders. They had awakened not just an ancient human, but humanity's only hope against a threat from beyond the stars. The excavation site was transforming around them, revealing the true scope of the preparations that had been made for this moment. The governments of the world need to be informed, Elena said. Though she already knew how impossible that would be to accomplish. Humanity needs to prepare for war. Preparation has already begun. Zara 73 replied, gesturing to the structures emerging from the ice. The beacon's activation has triggered awakening protocols at similar sites around the globe. Facilities buried beneath the Sahara, hidden in the depths of the Pacific, concealed within mountain ranges on every continent. Humanity's defense network is coming online. Dr. Hassan's equipment was now displaying readings that defied known physics. Energy signatures are appearing at locations around the globe. Australia, Brazil, Siberia, dozens of sites are suddenly broadcasting the same type of signal. Elena realized that their small Antarctic discovery was just one node in a vast network that spanned the planet. The implications were overwhelming. How many people knew about this? How many governments were involved? None. Zara 73 said simply. These installations were placed and hidden, using technology beyond current human understanding. They have remained dormant and undetectable until this moment. Humanity's defense against the silence was established without humanity's knowledge or consent. The ethical implications were staggering. But Elena knew they were past the point of moral debates. An alien intelligence that consumed consciousness was approaching Earth, and humanity's only defense was a network of ancient weapons they didn't understand. What do you need from us? Elena asked, accepting the reality of their situation. The defense network requires human operators. But not just any humans. The silence can infiltrate and control most minds, but there are individuals with natural resistance to its influence. These people must be identified, trained, and prepared for mental combat against an entity that has conquered entire civilizations. Dr. Kim looked up from her notes, her face filled with determination and fear. How do we identify these resistant individuals? What makes someone able to fight this thing? Creativity, paradoxical thinking, the ability to hold contradictory concepts simultaneously. Artists, dreamers, those whose minds work in ways that confuse linear thought patterns. The silence understands logic and rational thinking, but it struggles with imagination and emotional complexity. Elena felt a strange sense of destiny settling over her. Throughout her career, she had always been drawn to puzzles that others considered impossible, mysteries that required unconventional thinking. You need us to help you find and train these people. More than that, Zara 73 said, its ancient eyes focusing on each member of the team in turn. Each of you was drawn to this discovery for reasons beyond scientific curiosity. Your minds have already shown resistance to the silence's influence, or you would have been consumed by the knowledge I have shared. You are among the first recruits in humanity's final war. As if responding to the being's words, the structures emerging from the ice began to glow with the same blue light as the pendant around Zara 73's neck. Elena understood that they were standing at the threshold of a new age for humanity, one that would test not just their technology and weapons, but their very consciousness itself. The excavation site was becoming something far more significant than an archaeological dig. It was transforming into humanity's first training ground for a war that would be fought not with conventional weapons, but with the power of human imagination and will, against an intelligence that sought to extinguish individual thought forever. 3 months after the awakening in Antarctica, the world had changed in ways that most people couldn't understand but somehow felt in their bones. Elena stood in the command center of what was once the excavation site, now transformed into humanity's primary defense installation. Screens around the room displayed data from awakened facilities across the globe. Each one, a node in a network that spanned continents. The initial chaos following the beacon's activation had given way to a strange new reality. Governments had scrambled to understand the sudden appearance of ancient structures in their territories, but the installations had made themselves known on their own terms. They emerged from hiding with technologies that rendered human military power irrelevant, demanding cooperation rather than conquest. Neural pattern analysis complete on the latest batch, Dr. Anderson reported from her expanded medical station. We've identified 47 more individuals with natural resistance to consciousness infiltration. They're being transported from 6 different countries. Elena watched the arrival feeds showing confused but determined people from around the world stepping into transport vehicles that defied known physics. Artists from Tokyo, physicists from CERN, musicians from Nashville, philosophers from Oxford. Each person had been identified by criteria that Zara 73's collective consciousness understood, but could only partially explain. The resistance pattern seems to correlate with cognitive flexibility, Dr. Kim observed, reviewing psychological profiles. People who can hold multiple contradictory ideas simultaneously, who think in metaphors rather than strict logic, who create rather than just consume information. Zara 73 stood at the center of the command room, its form now slightly translucent, as its consciousness expanded across the global network. The silence approaches faster than projected. Its advanced scouts have reached the outer edge of your solar system, probing the quantum barriers we established among the asteroid belt. Dr. Hassan looked up from his physics station, his face grim. We're detecting quantum fluctuations throughout the solar system. Space itself is being tested, probed for weaknesses. Whatever this thing is, it's already trying to break through our defenses. Elena had spent weeks training with technologies that challenged everything she thought she knew about reality. Neural interfaces that allowed her to perceive dimensions beyond normal space. Consciousness exercises that prepared her mind for contact with an alien intelligence, and weapons that fired concentrated human creativity at targets that existed more in thought than matter. First contact protocols are active, announced Dr. Chen from his position at the Cultural Analysis Station. We're picking up transmissions that appear to be attempts at communication, but they're directed at our subconscious minds, rather than our conscious awareness. The silence was subtle in its approach. Elena had learned. It didn't announce itself with dramatic displays of power, but instead whispered into the spaces between thoughts, the quiet moments when the mind wandered. Its influence spread like an infection of complacency, making its victims want to stop questioning, stop creating, stop being individuals. Dream analysis from major population centers shows increasing homogenization, Dr. Anderson reported with concern. People are beginning to have the same dreams, think the same thoughts. The influence is spreading even with the silence still at the edge of the solar system. Elena felt a chill of recognition. It's not just probing our defenses. It's already begun the invasion through quantum entanglement. Every mind it touches becomes a potential gateway for its consciousness to enter our reality. Zara 7-3 nodded gravely, its multiple consciousness focused entirely on the threat. The silence learned during our first encounter. It no longer requires physical proximity to begin infiltration. It can project fragments of its consciousness across space, using quantum mechanics we barely understand. Around the command center, alarms began sounding as installations worldwide detected the first direct attacks on human consciousness. Elena watched in horror as population centers in major cities reported sudden behavioral changes. People stopping mid-conversation to stare at nothing. Children drawing the same symbols simultaneously across different continents. Scientists abandoning their research to pursue identical projects. Johannesburg facility reports total population compliance in a 6-block radius, came a report from Dr. Hassan. Moscow installation detecting rapid consciousness infiltration, spreading through the subway system. The silence is using transportation networks to accelerate mental contagion. Elena realized they were witnessing the opening moves of a war unlike anything in human history. The enemy wasn't attacking cities or infrastructure, but the very concept of individual thought. Every mind it captured became a weapon against those who remained free. Activate Defense Protocol 7, Zara 7-3 commanded, its voice now emanating from speakers throughout the installation. Begin widespread distribution of consciousness protection frequencies. Elena watched as facilities around the globe began broadcasting signals that protected human minds from infiltration. The technology was based on patterns of thought that the silence couldn't comprehend or counter. Rhythms of creativity and chaos that confused its logical approach to consciousness. The protection works, Dr. Anderson reported with relief, but only for people whose minds can adapt to nonlinear thinking patterns. Roughly 30% of the population shows natural immunity. Another 40% can be trained to resist, but the remaining 30% remain vulnerable. The mathematics of survival were stark. Even with their defenses, billions of people could still be consumed by the alien intelligence. Elena understood that they weren't fighting to prevent invasion, but to ensure that enough of humanity remained free to continue existing as individuals. Contact with outer system defense platforms, Dr. Hassan announced. The silence has reached Jupiter's orbit and is attempting to disable our quantum barriers. The installations Zara 7-3 established are fighting back, but they report the enemy is more powerful than anticipated. Elena watched tactical displays showing a battle fought with weapons of pure consciousness. Ancient human technology, enhanced by 2,000 years of automated development, engaged an intelligence that existed partially outside normal reality. The conflict played out across multiple dimensions simultaneously, visible to human observers only as strange fluctuations in space itself. First, direct encounter incoming, Zara 7-3 warned. A probe of the silence's consciousness is attempting to reach Earth's surface. All trained personnel to neural combat stations. Elena took her position at a device that looked like a chair surrounded by crystalline structures. The neural interface connected her mind directly to the defense network, allowing her consciousness to join the battle. Around her, other trained individuals did the same, their thoughts becoming weapons against the approaching alien mind. The contact was unlike anything Elena could have imagined. The silence wasn't evil in any human sense, but rather represented a form of existence so alien that coexistence was impossible. It sought to absorb all consciousness into itself. Not from malice, but from a fundamental inability to understand individuality as anything other than a disease to be cured. Elena felt the edges of her own mind being probed by the alien intelligence. It tested her thoughts, looking for logical patterns it could understand and exploit. But her training had prepared her for this moment. She responded not with reason but with pure creativity, flooding the connection with images, emotions, and concepts that defied categorization. "It's working," she heard Dr. Anderson say through the neural link. The silence is recoiling from direct contact with protected minds. It can't process nonlinear thought patterns without risking damage to its own consciousness structure. Around the globe, similar battles were being fought as trained defenders engaged the alien intelligence in mental combat. Each successful resistance weakened the Silence's ability to understand human consciousness, creating blind spots in its perception that could be exploited. But Elena also felt the terrible cost of the defense. Each mind that fought the Silence directly risked being damaged or destroyed by the contact. Several defenders had already been lost, their consciousness scattered by encounters with an intelligence too vast for individual minds to fully comprehend. "The probe is retreating," Zara 7-3 announced. But this was only the beginning. The Silence now understands the nature of our defenses and will adapt its approach accordingly. Elena disconnected from the neural interface, her mind reeling from the contact. She had touched something that existed beyond human understanding. Something that made the vastness of space seem small by comparison. But they had proven that human consciousness could resist, that creativity and individuality were weapons the Silence couldn't easily counter. "Casualty reports from global facilities," Dr. Chen said, his voice heavy with the weight of loss. 47 trained defenders lost to consciousness fragmentation, but the probe has been successfully repelled from Earth's immediate vicinity. Elena looked around the command center at her exhausted but determined colleagues. They had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. The Silence would return with greater force and better understanding of their defenses. Humanity's survival now depended on their ability to maintain individual thought in the face of an intelligence that sought to make all consciousness uniform. "The installations are already preparing for the next assault," Zara 7-3 reported. "Automated systems are manufacturing new defense technologies, training programs are being expanded, and we're identifying more naturally resistant individuals. But the window for preparation is closing." Elena understood that their Antarctic discovery had unleashed more than just an ancient warning. They had activated humanity's last hope and simultaneously announced their location to their greatest enemy. The Silence was now fully aware of Earth's existence and would not stop until every human mind had been absorbed into its collective consciousness. "How many more attacks can we withstand?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "The Silence is patient and essentially immortal," Zara 7-3 replied. "It will test our defenses repeatedly, learning from each encounter. Our advantage lies in humanity's capacity for growth and change. The Silence evolves slowly, but human consciousness can adapt and create new forms of resistance." Elena realized that they had entered a new phase of human existence. The species that had once looked to the stars with wonder now fought for the right to remain individuals in the face of an intelligence that sought to make all consciousness one. The excavation that had started as archaeology had become the foundation for humanity's evolution into something capable of resisting the ultimate predator. "Begin Phase 2 operations," Elena commanded, accepting her role in the conflict. "Expand recruitment of resistant individuals, accelerate training programs, and prepare for extended siege warfare. The Silence may be unstoppable, but so is human determination to remain free." Around her, the installation hummed with activity as humanity prepared for a war that would determine not just their survival, but their right to exist as individual beings in a universe that contained intelligences beyond imagination. The something unstoppable they had awakened was not just the Silence, but humanity's own capacity to resist any force that threatened their essential nature. The Antarctic ice above them continued to melt in patterns that revealed more ancient structures, each one a testament to the preparation that had been made for this moment. Elena understood that their species had been guided toward this confrontation for millennia, shaped by influences they had never suspected, prepared for a test that would either elevate them to a new level of existence or see them consumed entirely. The battle for human consciousness had begun. And failure was not just extinction, but something far worse. The complete loss of what made humanity human. In awakening Zara 7-3, they had unleashed both salvation and damnation, setting in motion events that would echo across the galaxy for eons to come.